Hello, and welcome.
Hello.
It's another episode of Extra Credits Book Club Podcast, the podcast where we let duplicitous and fickle wheel determine what we read, and then we talk about those books.
For 8 weeks straight.
Sometimes. But I'm a host, William Woodard. With me is the other host,
Alex Green.
That's right. This time, we're reading, or I suppose we started. That's not true either. Alex started. I did my best.
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit.
Sabriel by Garth Nix. I know you're reading the physical book.
Yes.
But
I have the full trilogy.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
But the audiobook that I'm listening to is narrated by Tim Curry. Which is light. But I gotta tell you, I really I've never felt so lost so soon in a book.
It could just be the way that things are being described or not being described that is just like doing nothing to conjure any images inside your brain.
Maybe. It's entirely possible, but it means that you're you're in charge of telling everybody and me what happened.
Okay. Well, the prologue begins kind of similarly to the prologue in Equal Rights, to be honest.
Yeah.
Where there's a village, a baby being born, and a mysterious stranger showing up. Except this time, both the baby and the mother are dead. And
right.
It's kind of like dark and stormy night vibes. And the baby is like really cold to the touch. And this mysterious stranger kind of blows in with the night wind, and we find out that he's her dad. His name's, how is it pronounced? Is it Aaabbhoorrssooon?
Aaabbhoorrssooon, yeah.
Okay. And we're kind of like immediately introduced to this concept that death is a separate plane of existence. And there are a series of gates that a spirit has to cross through in order to be all the way dead. So he kind of determines, like there's a midwife there and he's like, no, let me give this a try. And he like picks up the baby and he kind of goes searching for her and immediately transports himself into like this death realm. And it kind of feels very similar to like the rivers of Greek mythology that ferry the souls to the underworld. It's like a very cold, rushing river. And he kind of finds this baby before it's crossed through the first gate, which if she had already crossed through, it would be a lot harder to bring her back. But it's described as like the first gate is described as like a veil of mist with a single dark opening where the river poured into the silence beyond. And he goes and retrieves her spirit, walks them back to the border where life is. So I think what happens when somebody transcends into the death realm, it's like astral projection where you kind of just leave your body where it is, but then mentally you cross over. And then you have to go, like, once your spirit is like projected into death, you have to get back to like where the portal is almost, and then get back to your body, it seems like. Because there's always this sense of like having to get back to like the opening or a doorway or something every time somebody goes through.
Pick up in.
I had to go back and read this part a couple of times because I was kind of like specifically looking to see like what happens when someone's done, like how do they get back? Because in my mind I was like, okay, is it like in His Dark Materials where Will has like the blade and he cuts through and just steps through a portal, and then he and his body are just together and he doesn't have to get back to his body in another realm. But it seems like the point of entry is like where your body is, and you have to get back to it so that you can come back into life.
Right.
I think.
I just kind of assumed that you like, it's like when you realize that you're dreaming and you can just turn it off.
That's what I thought at first too.
Like,
but
I'm out of here.
Yeah, it says like when he like goes, he finds her crying. He's like walking through the current. They have a little moment together, and then he has to walk back, I think. But he finds, I don't know. I know like Sabriel has to do it at another point. But anyways.
One thing I thought was really cool in the audiobook was, and I was crushed when it didn't continue, but the audiobook started with some really dope music.
Oh yeah, I listened to that part.
And it like continued on for a while, and I was like, oh my god, is this like fully like, are we getting music throughout? No.
Rats. That would have been nice.
But I made a note that the way that it was described, because they, and this could just be my own personal bias, or I don't know if bias is the right word, but like hang up, is I've been reading the Dark Sword trilogy by Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss. And they have, if a baby is born without magic at all, they're referred to as dead.
Oh.
They have no life. And like dead
Right.
and life are capitalized.
Dead and or death and life are capitalized in here too.
But like if you are born dead without magic, you're still literally alive. You just don't have any magic, therefore you're dead, and then they take you off and probably kill you for real. So when this started and they were talking about how the baby's dead, I was like, is it really dead, or they just like, is this a whole it's dead but not dead scenario here?
Right. Yeah, it's hard to tell. Like, we're kind of made to believe that she's like stillborn almost.
Right.
But then he kind of, I think he finds something that had like picked her up.
Yeah, there's like a
And
lizard monster who's like, hey, what's going on?
yeah, his name's Karagor. And he's just like holding the baby, like, got your baby. And then they have to go back. I don't know. Like, it seems like I'm reading this again, and I actually don't know if a person has to return to the point of entry, but I know at one point Sabriel does. But there's something that they refer to called a charter mark that is like on her forehead that kept her alive, even though she was like en route to the first gate of death.
See, this makes no sense to me. Like, wires are already getting crossed.
It is confusing.
It's a lot of really contradictory language.
Yeah. But the important takeaway from the prologue is that there's a baby girl who was dead but is no longer dead. She is the daughter of some dude who can transcend planes of existence named Aaaaabbhoorrssooon. He's got some curious bells that he's wearing. We'll find out more about those later. And then he basically, there's this midwife there, and he just kind of like conscripts her. He's like, hey, why don't you come with me? I need somebody to look after my kid. And then there's like another dude that goes with them too. And like they're never heard of again. Like just these two people who come to like look after this baby. But he says to the midwife that he's a necromancer, but not of the common kind. Where others of the art raise the dead, I lay them back to rest. And those that will not rest, I bind. So that's kind of dope. He's like a necromancer, like warrior dude.
Kind of
That's basically the whole prologue.
Yeah. And at this point, it was only until like the last part when he goes into the Death Realm, starts talking to Aragorn, that I was like, am I missing something? Did I black out and suddenly we're in the middle of the book?
No, it's really random. Like, we're never really given any information about who Karagor is, and he's never heard from again. So, good shit. Anyways, 18 years goes by, and in chapter 1 of the book, we meet Sabriel, who's now 18. She goes to a boarding school, and she's raising a dead rabbit who belonged to like a younger classmate of hers. And all we know about her is that she's tall, curiously pale, and has night black hair, which is fashionably bobbed. And she's a prefect. So she's like typical nerd.
Yeah,
Which
I made a note that I was like, oh
her.
no, she's a hall monitor.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I can't tell if like being a prefect is like being a cop at school, where it's like
Yeah,
you do
it
it
for
because
sure is.
you're a bully and you want power, or is it like a byproduct of just like you do really well in school, so you have the unfortunate mantle to carry of being a prefect?
I mean, it could be, but like bullies, I think, don't do that kind of stuff in school. They just continue to be bullies and then they become cops.
Yeah.
But I think the people who become prefects or, hall monitors or whatever, they're the megalomaniacal nerd who is eventually
Yeah.
going to deny people their severance packages when they become CEOs.
Yeah. But she seems like a benevolent hall monitor, because she's like raising dead pets for her classmates, and she seems to be someone that people like come to when there's a problem.
Yeah, even the staff.
Yeah, exactly. And the college is called Wyverley, or is it pronounced differently in the
No,
audiobook?
it's like Wyverley.
Wyverley, okay. And is the name of the town she lives in called Onselstieri or Onselstier? I listened to the audiobook for a second just to hear how Tim Curry pronounced it, and I think he said Onselstier.
No, it's not quite that flowery.
Okay.
I think it's just like Ancelstier.
Okay. Anyways, it's a made-up town. It's in the north of whatever country they're in, which is presumably England?
No, it's Australia.
Is it actually?
Well, it's based off Australia because it's a made-up fictional place.
Well, right. Yeah.
But what really tripped me out, and like it almost started a spiral of me not being able to wrap my head around this book, was she turned on a light switch, and I was like, excuse me, a light switch? I thought this was a fantasy book.
Yeah, there's like buses.
But it turns out that this is like Ancelstier is just an analog for 20th century Australia.
Right, because I guess it makes sense, like wait, is Northern Australia hot or cold?
All hot.
But I think southern Australia is really cold, isn't it?
No, it's all hot all the time. And their winter is just like spring. Not quite as hot.
They don't get snow?
Maybe in
Okay.
some places. I know they've got mountain ranges.
I think I'm trying to draw too many parallels between this land and Australia now, and I'm
It's
getting
probably
mixed
not
up.
that close.
um, but there's this line that's like, she goes back to like bring this bunny back to life, and every time she's using her little necromancy powers, it like her eyelashes get all like frosted over, like she comes back like super chilly and like covered in frost,
Oh
and
yeah.
she's like blinking little snowflakes out of her eyes, which I thought was kind of dope. um and this line could be like kind of cringe if it wasn't said by like, or thought by somebody who was like a literal necromancer, but it's like, death and what came after death was no great mystery to Sabriel. She just wished it was. And like that could be so like there's a darkness inside of me energy, but somehow it's not for her.
I don't know. It sounded pretty cringe when Tim Curry said it. This is also when I barked out laughing because when she brings the bunny back to life, the girl who owns the bunny calls out to it like, "Oh, bunny!" But because it's Tim Curry, it was bunny.
That's beautiful.
It couldn't have been better. Bunny.
Okay, so we get a little bit of like world building at this point, where
Do
we
we?
find out that a little like Wyverley College, because it's so close to this structure called the Wall, which separates kind of like their civilized world from what's called the Old Kingdom in the north. It kind of has magic as like an unofficial addition to the syllabus, and it seems to be part of the curriculum in places like this close to the Wall, and that's why Aaaaabbhoorrssooon chose this school for Sabriel to attend. And it seems like the cities and towns that are farther away, magic doesn't work there because you have to be within a certain proximity to the Old Kingdom in order for it to work. And it's also like, it seems like they don't think of it or don't consider it and don't think it's like socially fashionable to talk about. Like, it's kind of like what it was like to be super into astrology before TikTok made it popular. Like, now it's so mainstream, but it feels like it's kind of like an elective. Like, magic as a subject is like an elective. It doesn't get printed on your like academic transcript. But we learn a little bit about like how well Sabriel's done in school. Like, she's done like English, math, science, fighting arts, etiquette, and magic.
Right, I remember that. I thought it was
yeah, and I thought that was
weird
cool.
that it's like a boarding school that teaches magic. Sure, we, that's not a new concept to millennials. We done lived through Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But a boarding school that teaches magic and also etiquette and also martial arts
Yeah.
is weird.
It's well-rounded.
And it's all girls.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that's kind of fun.
I mean, sure, it is, but it is an eclectic itinerary or syllabus, I guess.
Totally. And like, that's about as much as we hear about what school is like and like what the lessons are like. Like, they're kind of referenced when she's like drawing knowledge from lessons past later on, but
I think
that's all we really
she's
need
also
to know
complaining about not doing particularly well in certain subjects.
Yeah, I think she was mad that she got second in fighting arts or something like that.
Yeah, because there's this huge, like, this whole section where it lists off her uh her scores in all these different subjects, and my
Mm-hmm.
ears glazed over. I'm like, oh no, you got 22nd in fucking math? Cry about it, dude.
I was like paying so close attention. I was like, how'd she do? And then I'm like, how would I do? Um,
Here, I would do
but
terrible. I'm such a terrible student. I don't
well, that's
even know
because
why
you
I went to my entire senior year. I didn't do a fucking thing. No, I
yeah, but
didn't
you're
do a single through my entire senior year. Not a single ounce of homework was ever done.
I can't imagine. Like, I never even skipped a class. Like,
I didn't
there is
either, but I just never did homework.
no, but you told me that you'd sit in like the front row and read a book. Like, I would never have
Yeah.
the balls to do that.
In hindsight, it's super disrespectful. I should have gone a couple rows.
Well, I mean, that's on the teacher to be like, "Hey, get out of here if you're not going to pay attention." But like I think my need to do well in school is also driven by a deep-seated fear for disappointing authority figures,
Man,
which I
fuck
know is
them.
something you don't feel.
Fuck authority.
But Sabriel is like kind of we get a little bit of information about how the headmistress like really likes her because she's never too bothered about the fact that her dad only comes to visit twice a year.
Yeah.
And Sabriel's like thinking to herself, oh, but he has a lot of like unofficial visits that he does. And we're like, what is that? And we're never gonna find out what they are because it doesn't happen. But in my mind, because Harry Potter is so like woven into my neural pathways, I'm like, oh,
Fireplace
he
talk
must
to her.
appear in the fireplace. Yeah. Like, because she's just like sitting in a study waiting for her dad to come visit her.
I think
She's
it's
like
just kind of like an
drinking
astral
tea by the
projection. Like
fire.
they just hang out in the astral plane for a
Oh,
minute.
yeah, that makes way more sense than Firehead. Um, and she's kind of like pontificating about the pros and cons of because she's in her final semester at this boarding school. And she's like, okay, well, do I want to stay near the wall and like continue to develop my magic and like stay near the old kingdom? Or do I like want to go into the city and continue my education, have more of a social life? But all of her like thinking time is interrupted when a younger classmate comes like barreling in and she's like, there's some kind of black shape trying to get into the school because someone opened a door at night, which is like 101, never do that. And
Yeah.
Sabriel like dashes out and the girl like gasps at such a the quote is a cavalier treatment of good china, which I really liked.
Yeah, I
And
remember that one too. Cause she
I was
she
like,
was
I
holding a
love that.
teacup. She was
Yeah.
drinking tea and holding a teacup. And when this girl
Hmm.
delivered the terrible news, Sabriel just kind of like tosses it aside, and the
Yeah.
girl's
The etiquette.
uh,
But Sabriel like rushes out. And sorry, I totally
no,
talked right over you.
it's fine. You've got the reins. I'm just learning about this book for the first time.
So, okay, Sabriel runs to the dorms, and there is a dark shape standing in the middle. And it's described as being if someone had cut a man shaped figure out of the night, carefully choosing a piece devoid of stars. And Sabriel starts doing like somatic magic. Like, we see like charter magic in action for the first time, and she's drawing symbols of the charter. So she's kind of doing like some form of sigil magic or like Reiki symbols. Like she's just drawing shapes in the air. And I
I
think,
kind of imagined it. You know how in Witcher when he does like his little finger movements?
oh, yeah, for the signs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I like that. Because I think it's like she's not doing like big sweeping gestures. I don't think it must just be like little symbols because she's trying to do as many as
Or some
possible.
like some of these.
Yeah, like a little.
Like old Simon from the D&D movie. doing his little
Right.
embarrassing spells.
Yeah. um and she's like in kind of like a fighting stance to do it almost. So,
Yeah.
but this is the first mention of something called charter magic that never really gets explained to us, but it seems like it's sanctioned, governable, recognized, and teachable magic. And then we find out there's like another form called free magic, which I think was mentioned at the beginning. No, I don't think it actually was. I think it's later.
This could
But
be the inference I got based on the fact that they call it charter magic. And this could be Dragon Age damage done to my brain.
mhm,
But when I hear the word charter, I assume a church.
right.
So is it like kind of this like religiously sanctioned magic? Like that's what the hypothetical pope has deemed is the only kind you are allowed to use?
Maybe. Yeah, it's hard to know. Like my mind went more like government for some reason. I don't know why. But I
Could
mean,
be
I think
both.
both or neither. Like we
Yeah,
really
we
don't
don't
know.
know.
It's kind of whatever you're interpreting at this point. But that it's the kind that's taught in school in their curriculum. And free
Right.
magic is kind of like what happens beyond the wall in the old kingdom. And it seems like it's a far more like primal, like potent type of magic that is kind of more similar to like chaos magic, I guess, because there's
Yeah,
no
to
symbols associated with it.
I guess a more like to bring it back to, since we were already on the topic of D&D,
Yeah.
to me charter magic is a wizard casting spells
Yeah.
and free magic is a sorcerer casting spells.
Yeah. That's kind of how I started categorizing it in my head too. And I see no reason to dispute that. I think that's
It vibes.
pretty well it. Yeah. So she gets the attention of this creature and slips over the border into death. And in this realm, she can see the true shape of the creature. And she says that it's humanoid, but what is more terrifying to her is that she sees this like magical tether, like umbilical thread almost that's connecting it to someone who's controlling it.
Yeah.
And she's like, and like I think the magistrix of the school is there being like, what do you see? And she's kind of explaining this to the magistrix. And she's basically like, I want to try to speak to it because it hasn't made any move to harm anybody. So maybe it just needs to pass on a message. And it has like a sack for her. And he like throws it into the river, which is like, thanks. You couldn't hand it over.
Yeah,
And
throw it
she
on
has
the
to, like,
ground
fish
at least.
around. Yeah, so she's like fishing around for it. She gets it. And then she hears her father's voice yelling, like, Sabriel, my messenger, take the sack. And by hearing her dad's voice in that moment, she's realizing that there's something deeply wrong. And now that she's going to have to just like leave the school. Like she basically just like dismisses this creature. Like we don't really hear about how it's resolved. It just kind of is like, all right, later. And she is talking to the like headmistress or whatever. And in the bag that she gets, there's like a sword and a leather bandolier, and it has all of these different pouches that have different bells in them. And she's like, "Oh my god, these are my dad's instruments. These are necromancer tools." And that's when we kind of find out that necromancy is technically classified as free magic, so it's not governed by the charter. But the necromancy that Aaabbhoorrssooon controls is something different, because it's binding, not raising, and that he was a faithful servant of the charter. So it's kind of like some kind of combination of the two.
Right.
But that's chapter 1.
That's yeah. Uh I don't really, I mean, I don't have much else to add. This is the until like chapter 7 and 8, this is the last time things made sense to me.
Okay. Well, we're gonna make it through.
I mean, other than like the
So,
generic, the boilerplate plot points, like obviously she goes to the border and has a cute little time with the military in this next chapter,
mhm.
which I was like, what are we doing?
Wait, why?
It felt so unnecessary.
It did feel pretty random. Like she is just like all of a sudden, oh, we're done with school now forever.
Yeah, she
She's
just
on a bus.
fucked off.
Yeah, she's like, I gotta go now. My dad's in trouble. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, education. I have got to go save my dad. So she takes a bus the next day and she goes to the border of the wall. And it kind of feels like the front of like World War One, kind
Yeah,
of.
although
It's
I
like a
think
military checkpoint.
the like the vibe, the way, I think at some point she walks past some of their weapons, and it's
Yeah.
fully like World War II era.
Yeah, that's right. But a lot of them have like spears, but there's trenches. But then they also have sword bayonets. So there's like
Yeah,
a
this is
lot
where
of
I was
different
like,
things
what are
happening
you?
here.
What's happening? Like, make up your mind. Have one or the other, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And we kind of get this first glimpse of what the wall looks like. And I don't think it's very high. I think it's just
Well, you
a
could have.
wall.
I
Um,
couldn't tell you how it was described.
I'm gonna see if it says, but the most important thing to note about the wall is that it has charter marks running through the stone. So if you kind of look at it in a certain way, you can see the little marks kind of just like running, like the reflection of water kind of under the surface. And she meets a soldier and says she's a citizen of the old kingdom. She's returning home. She like summons her official documents in like this really kind of edgelord way, which was funny to me.
Yeah.
She's like,
And I
here you
think
go.
because the border patrol guy was like, papers, please.
Yeah, and I think she was like wanting to fuck with him a little bit.
Yeah,
But
the way that
he
Tim Curry
clearly,
made him sound was pretty bitch.
yeah. He was pretty bitch. Like he has no idea what he's looking at when she passes over her like special old kingdom passport that's like made on handmade paper with purple ink and like finely illustrated. And he's just kind of like, eh. And so she starts like summoning a spell to try to like flick her documents back into her hand, but she's stopped by feeling like another magical presence, and it makes her like she's carrying skis because beyond the wall is just like winter time forever, and her skis like fall down into like the crook of her elbow, and it breaks her concentration and she can't get her papers back. But these other like charter mages come through, and there's like a moment of kind of recognition between them where they touch like foreheads, like they touch like not forehead to forehead because that would be weird, but like they just like put their hands on each other's forehead to like feel their charter marks to see if it's like unsullied and uncorrupted. And part of me is like, can you always see that? Is it like a brand, or is it just something that kind of like ignites when magic activates it?
Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it just says touched the charter mark. And like they have these like very almost transcendent experiences when they touch other people's charter marks. Like they talk about like endless galaxies and like sinking into like a sea of stars. And I'm like, it
Please
seems
don't.
like weirdly intimate.
I'm saving myself for marriage.
And this charter mage who appears, his name's Colonel Horace, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and they have a conversation about Aaaaabbhoorrssooon and how he's very well known at the wall because he set up a bunch of like wind flutes to prevent the
Yeah.
dead from crossing. And we get a little bit of backstory about the wall, because it seems like they used to change the perimeter, or they used to change the crossing every so many years. But then kind of like the governing body in charge of the military was like, you guys, like, we don't have the fucking resources to keep moving you around. You're just going to stay there now. But what that resulted in was like this accumulation of like death and free magic leaking over the wall, because it just kept concentrating and building up in this one area. And now dead people are not staying dead. And Sabriel's like, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if my dad is dead, these wind flutes that he set up that's helping prevent dead people from crossing the wall are going to fail in the next 14 days when the full moon happens. So I need to get through, find out what happened to my dad. And the colonel's like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? Like, do you even know where you're going? She's like, well, I have the ability to summon a guide that will tell me the directions. And he's like, okay. But he also kind of has like a crude map. Oh, also, we're in chapter 3 now, by the way. Sorry. I don't remember where the barrier was. They kind of like flow into each other. But
yeah, and I'm no help in that.
He has this rough map that his patrols have put together as they've done these different crossings over the wall. And he points out a place that his patrols have called Cloven Crest, where there's a charter stone there that was like rend in two from what he thinks might be like a lightning strike or something. So Sabriel decides that's a good waypoint to start at. And then she can get there, summon her guide, because it's only about 8 miles away, and she thinks she can ski there before it's nighttime. And a lot, like, her reasoning around it is like, there will be some magic there. The path into death would be easier to tread because she has to go into death in order to summon her guide. And charter stones were often erected where free magic flowed, and crossroads of the free magic currents were often natural doorways into the realm of death. I do not know what free magic currents are, or where they come from, or what, like, if there's currents of magic, surely there must be like a source. And I don't know if that is something we'll learn more about. But like the
sure hope
onboarding,
so.
Yeah, I know, because like the onboarding expectation is very high from this book. It's like you need to be paying attention to every single fucking word.
It's like getting like, you start at a new company and they give you their onboarding binder, but everything they reference is something you don't know, and it acts as though you already should have known this.
It's like jargon that is so intrinsic to that organization that they made up to suit that organization's needs, but they give it to you as if you should already know what that is. And you're like, I have no fucking
Please
clue.
Help me.
Where's my glossary, please?
Yeah. It's pretty impenetrable at times. Me speaking from someone who could not penetrate most of what we read. Like, some of the stuff that you've said, I'm like, don't remember that.
Well, I mean, I also have the benefit of being able to like reference the words though too.
Something that really kind of ate at me was they constantly reference how dangerous the Old Kingdom is, but they never explain why, or why, like, the dead keep coming back. Like, why is that a problem? What's going on here, folks?
I know, like, it seems like the dead coming back is definitely a threat, hence the need for a figure like Aaabbhoorrssooon, but we're not sure if someone coming back from the dead is inherently sinister. But I guess we have to presume that it is.
Well, it's an inconvenience to be sure.
Right.
But also, as we get further in, it only gets further muddied when we learn more
Mm-hmm.
about Aaabbhoorrssooon.
Right. Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then it's like, well, what do you mean? What does that mean?
Yeah. But we also, there's Sabriel makes frequent reference to something called the Book of the Dead.
Yeah,
And I believe it's something that only she has access to. I think her dad gave it to her. I do not know if it's like part of her school curriculum or if
I
it's like
doubt it.
special necromancer knowledge. But I marked a page. I guess there was a dope passage, but I don't actually know if it was dope. Oh, it's not that dope, but it's very like this is the most information we have about Sabriel at this point, where Horace is like, I have a daughter. Like, I would not let her cross over into the Old Kingdom. And she responds with, I'm only 18 years old on the outside, she said, touching her palm against her breast with an almost wistful motion. But I first walked in death when I was 12. I encountered a fifth gate rester when I was 14 and banished it beyond the ninth gate. When I was 16, I stalked and banished a mordicant that came near the
Oh
school.
boy.
A weakened mordicant, but still. A year ago, I turned the final page of the Book of the Dead. I don't feel young anymore. That's so goth kid. Like, I kind of love that for her. But the guy's like, okay, you go right ahead,
Yeah,
miss.
that's big. That's
Best of luck
big.
out there.
I started listening to My Chemical Romance before they got popular.
Yeah, yeah. Been banishing dead before you guys fucking became into it.
Which is pretty rich that she mentions banishing a mordicant.
Yeah. But she does mention that it was very weak when she did. So at least she's being honest about the level of skill it took. But what I think is kind of cool is that she also says a phrase. She says, does the walker choose the path or the path the walker? Which I think is she quotes it from something within the body of works of charter magic. And it seems like when somebody who possesses a charter mark or can perform charter magic, there's something about the way that they say things that like has magical feeling to it when it's said out loud. Like it's described as like twining around her tongue like some lingering spice, and the colonel can kind of like pick up on the feeling too. And he's like, when you say those words, like it feels different than when somebody else says them. And we don't get a ton of it's never expanded upon, but I thought it was a really interesting way of like the power of like magical speaking and like how that can like have like the sensory effect of that. I thought that was really neat.
Right.
But yeah, she crosses over into the Old Kingdom, and that's the end of chapter 3.
And then it's skiing time
Mm.
for a hot minute.
For like 3 chapters, she's on like a cross-country ski adventure. Kind of.
Yeah.
But she's on her way, and she's finding the bodies of a lot of dead soldiers. And as she's finding like the dead patrols that like didn't come back.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she starts like drawing charter symbols for fire, cleansing, peace, and sleep in the air above the corpses and kind of cremates them on the spot. And then she's like, oh, he may have had like a dog tag or something. But she tries to pick it up and it like crumbles in her hand. And she's like, oh, fuck. Well, hopefully they recognize your sword. Anyway, gotta go. And she's on her way to Cloven Crest. And then she finds more bodies of the rest of the soldiers who were there on patrol. And she kind of has this small moment of like necromancy temptation to bring them back from the dead. And then she's like, oh, but they don't have heads. So we learn a little bit more about like the level of sentience, I guess, that like dead bodies reincarnated have, depending on what limbs they have at the time they're like reincarnated.
I mean, it would make sense. You can bring back a dead body, but if it doesn't have a head, it's just going to be like a mannequin.
Yeah, and then they're called hands. It's a derogatory term that free magic necromancers. It's on page 50. Should go without their heads. She could only bring them back as hands. A derogatory term that free magic necromancers used for their lackluster revenants, who retained little of their intelligence and none of their initiative. And there's like another thing called shadow hands, and it's like a skilled necromancer could easily raise those from the heads of the newly dead, which I thought was kind of cool. So we get little tidbits of like levels of necromancy, but
I suppose one gripe that I've got, like a genuine I don't like this about the book, because
Mhm.
despite me not being able to comprehend it like I'm a 3-year-old, I'm not disliking my time with this book.
Right.
But my actual genuine gripe is that anytime a beat is taken to explain something, it's explained in a way that makes me go, okay, cool. Now I have more questions than you gave me answers.
Yeah.
Like, why? Like, okay, I can understand why someone might want to resurrect someone without a head for, maintenance duties around the house. But when you
Yeah.
start bringing shit in like shadow hands, what the fuck are you talking about? This is starting to sound like a Pearl Jam song, dude.
Yeah, because we don't we don't find out why you would want to summon one over the other, or if there's like, I mean, I guess because she says a skilled necromancer could raise shadow hands. So maybe it's like
For what?
level of skill required. Probably just as like a lackey,
Why
just
wouldn't
someone to
you?
do your bidding.
Wouldn't a regular corpse just do the same thing? I don't get it. I don't understand the. I don't understand the need for extra levels of help around the house. Like, is a shadow hand better at scrubbing the bathtub than a fucking regular one?
Yeah, because like I mean, at this point, we don't really know a ton about like what necromancers need done. Like
Yeah.
what kind of deeds do they need enacted on their behalf by brainless servants? Like what are they doing up there? Like and we're not given any satisfying answers yet.
No. In fact, the worst kind of answer is the one that gives you more questions, and
Yeah.
those are all of them.
I know it feels like this is kind of Garth Nix's way of like world building by giving us little tidbits here and there, but because everything he's talking about is so singular to the world he's created, it's not giving us context, it's just creating more questions like you said.
Which isn't
Um
it isn't inherently bad.
no, but it is just creating like
But throw us a bone here, man.
yeah, exactly, or give us an index like something, or do what Lemony Snicket did where he just had an abundance of footnotes where it was like this a word here which means, and then
Oh,
gave us
sort
like
of
a
like
sentence example.
the hefty tome that is oh, that's reversed. You can't see that. But Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell,
Yeah.
uh a whopping 1,000 odd pages and footnotes galore.
Mm-hmm.
But footnotes, like, looking at some of the footnotes in this book, it's less footnotes as in explaining something as it is footnotes in the Terry Pratchett sense, where
Mm,
it's sort of like, because to me, Terry Pratchett footnotes are like the Arrested Development narrator, where a character will say
right.
something and the narrator will be like, that was not true.
Yeah. That's, I think, the elite way to use footnotes.
It's definitely the, like, footnotes as a means to a comedy punchline is.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Um, I, she has just found the bodies of the rest of the soldiers who came on patrol, and she sees charter marks on the bridge, like a bridge post, and she touches her mark, like as she's touching the bridge post, I guess.
Yeah.
And she finds this message from one of the dead guys who's yelling about how they were being chased by one of the greater dead, like servants, hands, a mordicant, uh, and she's like, oh my god, like what the fuck is? Why is a greater dead here? And if a greater dead is here, that's almost certainly linked to like her dad's disappearance, basically. But that's the end of chapter 4.
Oh.
And at the beginning of chapter 5, Sabriel makes it to Cloven Crest. And as she's looking at the charter stone that's been split there, she realizes that the reason it was split is because a charter mage had been sacrificed there, and it would have had to be sacrificed by a necromancer to either gain access to death or to help a dead spirit break through into life. But she's not sure which one. But it would have had to be an incredibly powerful necromancer to be able to do that, and in her mind, an incredibly evil necromancer to want to do that. And so she gets very nervous, but realizes that she doesn't want to camp at this spot, but she is going to use the magic here. Because of the way this mage was sacrificed, it kind of left what she describes as like a semi-permanent entry into death, kind of like a door being wedged ajar. So she's like, it'll be easy for me to just slip into death here.
Yeah.
But I want to protect myself before I go in there because I don't feel safe here. So she essentially like casts a circle, like what you would do in witchcraft before you cast a spell. And she like calls the corners more or less. Like she draws symbols with her sword in the ground to mark each of the cardinal directions, and they all kind of illuminate. But she kind of fucks up the one for north, and it doesn't quite light up as like robustly as the rest of them do. But she doesn't have time to fix it. She just she's cast it. She thinks she's going to be safe from both physical harm and free magic from it. And we learn a little bit about her bell bandolier, because she's bringing her bells with her into the like death, and
which led to a great amount of confusion for me, because when her bandolier was initially described, it seemed like the pouches on her bandolier were filled with like potions and tinctures and stuff like that. And then when she starts talking about bells, I'm like, where are these bells coming from? What are you talking about, dude?
Yeah, I mean, that my Witcher brain totally went there too, because I'm like, oh, it's like her oils and decoctions and like all that shit, but because alchemy. But it's like, I think the thing that tripped me up was how it was described as like hanging pouches, but the pouches are what's holding the bells, and they're hanging down in these like fitted leather pouches from it. So she's like unfastening them. But she has one bell called Rana, and they each have different like specific sounds, which I think is cool. This one brings silence in its wake. She has another one called Masrael, which is like a harsh, rowdy bell. It's Masriel. Okay. It's called the Waker. And then Kibeth or Kibeth. It's Kibeth.
I don't remember Tim Curry saying that one.
Okay. This one has several sounds. It's a difficult and contrary bell. It could give freedom of movement to one of the dead or walk them through the next gate. Many a necromancer had stumbled with this one and walked where they would not. So I guess there's a level of skill to being able to use the bells so you don't actually get affected by them. But there's another one called Dyrim or Dyrim, Dyrim. And it's a musical bell.
Wait, how do you spell it again?
Dyrim.
I would pronounce it Dyrim.
Yeah. This one's meant to symbolize the voice of the dead, the voice that the dead so often lost. but it could also still a tongue that moved too freely. So I guess it's kind of like a silent spell in some regard. And then there's a Belgaer, Belgaer. Don't know how to
Belgaer?
pronounce that. Yeah. This is a thinking bell. The bell most necromancers scorn to use. It could restore independent thought, memory, and all the patterns of a living person, or slipping in a careless hand, erase them.
So
And
do you
then
think?
there's
Go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna keep reading about bells.
Yeah, yeah. I just when you finish reading all the names of the bells,
Okay.
then I'll get to my
Uh,
point.
okay. Then there's Sereneth, the deepest, lowest bell, the sound of strength, the one that binds, the bell that shackles the dead to the wielder's will. And then there's the largest one called Astariel, Astariel, Astarail,
Astariel?
the sorrowful. Oh, she whispers it. The banisher, the final bell. Properly rung, it cast everyone who heard it far into death, everyone, including the ringer. Whoa.
Get your earplugs ready.
To be honest, I think the concept of bells is fucking cool.
Do you think, because all of these bells have a different purpose, some of them are imbuing a corpse with an aspect?
Mm-hmm.
And if, say, you want to make someone who has many aspects, do you think that they are achieved through making song?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I would guess, and I think that's so fucking cool.
Pretty rad. There's a couple of books that I've read, mostly about an exorcist who would send ghosts away.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the sort of like concept of that book was that one day, for some reason, it was never explained beyond for some reason, everyone who had died came back
Oh,
as ghosts.
okay.
And like freelance exorcists became hot commodity, and this guy in particular would send them away via tin whistle. Like he would weave a song that would wrap them up and then send them off.
That's really cool.
So maybe
I
it's the
think when
kind of same thing. You're basically like you're programming this empty vessel with the attributes you want, with
yeah,
ringing
totally.
bells.
Yeah, and like in like witchcraft as well, like ringing a bell is a way to like cleanse your space and like cleanse objects.
Right.
So I think that's a kind of cool tie-in where it's if you're using a bell to like banish the dead spirit or banish an evil spirit, kind of. I feel like Garth Nix has a little bit of like witchy learning that he's applying to this book, which I'm a big fan of.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
There's none of that like fucking high fantasy, highfalutin pew pew magic here, folks.
Or like in fucking Kingdom of the Wicked, where she has every opportunity to do a modicum of world building, and at every opportunity says no. I'm gonna just use a bunch of metal and bat shit or whatever to like
Check out
do
this.
something, but
This
I'm not gonna
magic makes
explain
pasta
what.
really good, though.
Yeah, I'm a kitchen witch. I just pour limoncello into all my fucking noodle water, and
Hell yeah,
everything's
dude.
great.
Toxic feminist attitude.
Yeah. Oh my god. Off topic, but apparently in the second book it gets like completely like explicit. Like somebody was
I
writing how
fucking doubt it.
no, she was like the word cock is in it.
That's for
That
free. That word's for free.
okay, but that's a far cry from like over the pants making out in the first book. Like one time they kissed.
Yeah, I suppose so. Maybe she's
Anyways.
really like grown into her smut.
Well, apparently there's all these moments where it's like, oh, her, like how she's always like, oh, grief honed me into a weapon, and like my anger drove me forward. She keeps on this trajectory, but the only way it's ever illustrated is that one time she wears like red lipstick, and it's like,
Whoa.
I painted my lips the color of murder. It's
God.
like, okay.
Can you
All
imagine
right.
if we read that whole series?
I think I would be dead.
This
'Cause
podcast would be over, dude.
Yeah, that book broke me. Like, I mean, it broke both of us, but like, I just like, I was so disappointed by it. I think that I was expecting it to be hot and fun, and it was just
Very
neither
lazy.
of those things. Yeah.
Anyway, on to a much better book.
Yeah. So, okay. Sabriel crosses into death. She brings Sereneth, but she's holding the clapper in her hand, so she doesn't actually ring it by accident. Doesn't accidentally ring it. Wow.
Right.
And she closes her eyes. She feels the boundary of life and death appear. And then she walks through into death, and then she uses like a little paper boat to summon her spirit guide. Like she just like blows it off into the wind, and it sails down the river. And that's the end of chapter 5.
Ooh.
And at the beginning of chapter 6, there's a monster that's feeling the magic that Sabriel is casting, and it starts making its way towards her. And we learn that this monster goes by the name of Thralk, and he's been dead for centuries and like body hopping between the dead, and apparently has just been like terrorizing the local villages and settlements in the area.
Yeah, of course,
for a
as
while.
a monster would want to do.
Yeah, he's just really living his best monster life, and
Also,
he's kind of like,
only until this moment did I realize that that monster is the guide she summoned.
is it?
Yeah, of course. Think about where it led her.
I don't know. I think
It
the
chased her.
guide she summons is her mom.
No way, the monster chases her essentially to Aaabbhoorrssooon's house.
No, that's a different one.
What? Oh my god, dude! What the fuck?
I'm so sorry.
I can't with this book.
It's basically, I think he's just some dude who's just been like fucking with the townspeople, and he
so
kind
upset.
of like it's gonna be okay.
That not only that they, because that same monster gets introduced later in this fucking chapter, or the
yeah,
Mordigant or whatever the fuck it's called, gets introduced later.
Yeah.
And
we don't know how
it's
it
also called a monster before it's called a Mordigant.
Yeah. So Sabriel, okay, well no, Thralk is like heading towards Sabriel. Sabriel's completely unaware. Her body is in her little cast circle. Thralk can sense that it's like weakly cast. He's kind of nervous because he can tell that the person who created it was powerful, but still has a long way to go training wise. For some reason, he can tell this by getting a feel for the magic in like the diamond shape that she's cast on the ground. And Sabriel, in her mind, the guide that she summons with her paper boat is like, she calls it her mother sending. Because like any kind of like summoned ghosts or whatever are all like sendings.
Yeah, they're referred to as sending.
Yeah, so she says like, hello mother to the guide, and the guide does never confirm nor deny that it's her mom, but gives her directions, like lists out the full way to go. And I'm sitting there like, I would be so fucked if that was how I had to find my way and I couldn't write it down or like consult a map. Like if I just had to remember verbally given directions to me, that's it for me. I'm dead. Like there's no way I'll remember that or know where to go. But the guide can tell something's off, and she's like, oh no, you have to go. Don't tarry, do not stop, no matter what happens. And so this is where it says Sabriel rushes back to the border with life. So Sabriel clearly has to, in this moment at least, return to where she entered. And maybe it's because of the nature of how she summoned the spirit with a paper boat. Like, I'm not sure, but she has to rush back to the border, and she's returning to her body just as Thralk, who's described as a grinning corpse-like creature, stepping through the failed north mark, its arms reaching to embrace her, carrion breath misting out of a mouth unnaturally wide. And I really liked that. I thought that was really fucking cool.
Pretty good.
But Sabriel grabs her sword and like stabs him through the neck, and it's burning him, and like his flesh is kind of coming apart, and he's like, oh fuck, like this is Aaaaabbhoorrssooon, or like Aaabbhoorrssooon's sword, and he's realizing who he's messed with. And she rings Sareneth to bind him and forces him to return to death and cross through all the 9 gates. And part of her is like, I wish I could get some information out of him, but I was told not to waste any time and just to get going. So I'm pretty sure like Thralk is like, fuck off you guys, or like, I'll fucking kill you someday, and like he just says some really cringy like one-liner as his body like is walking through all 9 gates, and he's kind of resigned to his fate, and he has really no control over what's happening. But she basically doesn't waste any time. She's regaining her bearings. She sets off, and she's following the directions that what she calls her mother sending gave to her. And one of the things that the guide tells her is that once she gets to this structure called the Long Cliffs, it will answer to the bell Masriel. Is that how you said it was pronounced?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So that's the one that like wakes up any dead people nearby. So she kind of like she manages to get to these cliffs after a long fucking cross-country ski journey, and she's exhausted at this point and like trying to find her way, and she has this feeling like she's being followed, and she's a little scared.
Right,
so she doesn't really know what to do. Yeah. And then she pulls out the bell, and she does this thing where she kind of like extends her senses around her to see if there's anything dead nearby that she shouldn't wake up by ringing this bell. And she can't immediately sense anything, but she can sense that there's something farther down the path that's gaining on her. And she's a bit nervous about that, but it's out of range of the bell. So she rings it, and she starts like, I think the way that the bell sounds is like tens of parrots screeching. And like, it just sounds like the scream of 1,000 birds when she rings it. And the thing that's been following her for where that materialized out of who knows where, catches up as she is ringing this bell and looking for this door that's supposed to appear in the cliffs after ringing the bell.
Right.
And it's described as man-like, more than man-high, and flames ran like burning oil on water where it trod. So it's a mordicant, a thing that could pass at will through life and death, made out of bog clay and human blood, molded and infused with free magic by a necromancer, and then a dead spirit is placed inside to guide it, which is really fucking spooky.
Yeah.
Like, if I read that as a kid, I would be so scared.
But it also,
like,
all of this stuff is implying that there is a necromancer out there who's being a bad boy.
100%.
But this is the beginning of chapter 7, right?
Yeah, where she runs to the cliffs, she starts pounding on the rock, a door appears.
Yeah.
It's got like silver charter marks, and she is able to run through the door, and the mordicant tries to follow. She closes the door, and its arm is kind of caught. But yeah, this is where chapter 7 starts.
Yeah, and that's when the like charter construct turns up to help.
Mm-hmm.
which is in my notes described as uh, made of charter symbols, which I was like, what?
Yeah, like it's almost like the charter symbols are like big huge versions of like molecules, and they all just kind of form together to like make the shape of a person. And like the outline is human, but the inside is like running with all
Yeah,
of these different marks.
it's very
But I
weird,
think
and
what's cool,
I couldn't visualize it. I couldn't wrap my head around it.
there's a description of it which I think was really really neat, where it says close to the illusion of flesh was imperfect, fluid, and unsettling. Its face wouldn't stay fixed, migrating between scores of possibilities. Some were women, some were men, but all bore tough, competent visages. Its body and clothing changed slightly too with every face, but two details always remained the same: a black surcoat with the blazon of a silver key, and a longsword redolent with charter magic. I think that's so fucking dope. So it's like a ghost, but it's like a bunch of ghosts that it just keeps flitting between, but they're kind of thematically linked.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I believe this ghost. I think she like asks it if the monster will be able to get through, and the ghost is essentially like, "Yeah, dude, he's
You
gonna
better
get through."
fucking get going. Yeah, and it's kind of like pushing her towards this passageway. And she's like, fuck, I guess I have to keep going. And then she's like halfway down the passage before she realizes that she's forgotten her pack and her skis in the other room. There's no time to go back for it. Which makes me sad because she had this like almanac, which I thought was really fucking cute.
Yeah,
Like
she
used it
did.
all
She
the time.
used it all the time to. It was almost like, uh, almost cheating a little bit, because anytime she kind of had a problem, the almanac had an answer for her. In even in an instance where an almanac would not be useful, I was like, "Hey, wait a
Yeah,
minute."
yeah. It's like I think she used it mostly to track the moon phases to know when her dad would come visit her
Yeah,
because he always came at the dark of the moon, which is like very necromantic. But she starts running down this passageway and realizes that the tunnel she's running through has charter marks in the stone for like light and fleetness and many other things that she doesn't know. And she has a moment of realizing that she thought she was way more prepared for the old kingdom than she actually is. Like she's realizing like the depth of magic that the old kingdom contains, and it's like unfathomable to her,
right.
who is just fresh out of school, and she's starting to feel like, uh-oh, have I overestimated my abilities here?
Yes, you have.
Fully. But she keeps running through the tunnel. She can hear the Mordicant like breaking through the door, but she hears above her the sound of what she thinks at first are like vehicles driving over the tunnel, but then realizes it's a waterfall
Yeah,
and there's rushing water, which is great news for her because the dead can't cross running water. So she's like, fuck yeah, I just need to find a way to get through this door, cross this river or whatever is above me, and then I'll be at least temporarily safe from this Mordicant that's chasing me. And at the end of the tunnel, she finds this other charter ghost who opens the door for her and comes with her, shuts the door behind her, drags like a portcullis down across the door and locks it with an iron padlock to try to keep the Mordicant from like breaking out. And she sees this river and it's fucking huge, like huge enough that in the middle of it there's an island big enough to hold a fucking giant estate, and then beyond that there's like a waterfall.
yeah,
And she realizes that the house she sees is her dad's house, and she's like, how the fuck am I supposed to get across the river to get to this house? And she remembers her spirit guide essentially saying, you'll find Aaabbhoorrssooon's bridge. And she says that out loud, and all these stepping stones start appearing, like all the way down to the river. And then when she gets down to the bank, they're appearing in the river, and she's like, this looks kind of sketchy. This river is really powerful. I don't want to get swept away. So she uses like the last bits of her energy to like jump across, and the Mordicant like breaks through the door and kind of just stands on the riverbank and stares at her and just watches her cross.
Fully
and,
just because I think it said like the Mordicant can just wait.
Ooh. For like an indefinite period of time.
Yeah.
But she makes it to the courtyard of the house, gets to like the doorstep of the house, and like just nopes out of existence, just passes the fuck out immediately.
Yeah. And this is where I was able to follow the book. Because when she wakes up, I believe she's being pestered by a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Who has a charter bell on its neck.
Yeah.
And also it talks. I forget what it called itself.
Mogget?
Yeah.
And
but,
it's like
if you get a chance, go back and listen to the audiobook from this chapter, because Tim Curry's dining out on this cat.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to it. Because then I need that in my head for when any other dialogue happens that's said by this cat.
Well, like, the long and short, not a lot happens in this chapter beyond this cat kind of explaining to Sabriel, like, because the cat calls her Aaaaabbhoorrssooon, and she's like, no, that's my dad. And he's like, no, your dad's dead.
Yeah, and she's like,
you're
what?
now Aaabbhoorrssooon.
She's like, no, there's no way. Like, he can't be dead. He talked to me. I'm gonna find him. I have to find him. He can't be dead.
I also made a note where because there's a sequence where these like charter constructs, more sendings, kind of bathe and dress her.
Yeah, they're like servants in the house.
And I made a note that I said it's always insane when like wizards and mages create constructs that effectively molest them.
Yeah. But it seems like maybe they didn't when they were first created. I think Mogget says something about how the longer they're in service, like the more kind of like
they get.
bad at their job and like curmudgeonly they get, and like they just like the compassion element like just kind of phases out over time, and that's why a lot of mages end up summoning, or a lot of Aaabbhoorrssooons end up summoning their own, so that they can kind of have their little preference sheet taken care
of. But I think it amounts to Sabriel having a bunch of questions about her dad and where he is, and also, what do you mean Aaabbhoorrssooon is a title?
Yeah.
And the cat's just like, shut up, eat your food.
Yeah, have
it's
some
dinner
wine.
Time.
And so she kind of has this moment where she hears or smells like perfume and starts like trying to slip into death while she's at the table, and the cat like scratches her and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're the only person who can break the wards of this house, and all of the dead spirits are fucking waiting for you to do it. And Sabriel is like appropriately ashamed. She's like, holy fuck, that's so embarrassing that I did that. I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. And the chapter basically ends with Mogget being like, you are Aaabbhoorrssooon. You must put the dead to rest. Your path is chosen. And she's like, well, I can't promise that I won't try to bring my dad back, even if he is dead.
Figures.
Yeah.
But
that's the beginning.
Yeah, that's the beginning. Even though I read all of it, I kept almost none of it. Hopefully this next batch, this next 8 chapters, hopefully it goes better for me. Because I really struggled. I was not having a good time.
I'm so sorry.
But anyway, that's it, folks.
Mm-hmm.
We're done. And we'll be back in
We
2
made it.
weeks with another 8 chapters. So, hey, look, thanks for watching and or listening. Who knows? This could be second monitor.
I feel like
Detrus.
we're pretty prime second monitor content.
But
And I'm not ashamed of it.
no, it's you know, if you have the kind of material that people put on their second monitor, it means it's worthy of their time. They're just doing other things at the
Mhm.
same time.
Yeah. Like me all the time.
Yeah, something's always on the second monitor. But anyway,
Mhm.
folks, we'll see you in 2 weeks for more Sabriel by Garth Nix. Take it easier.
Farewell.
Bye bye.